Hey there, Shane Larrabee with FatLab Web Support here, and I want to talk a bit about WordPress hate. I mean, let's be real. If you hang around developers long enough, you'll hear them trash WordPress. It's outdated, it's bloated, it's insecure, and yet somehow it still powers, over 40% of the web? So, why do so many developers hate WordPress? And more importantly, why do we keep using it? Let's break down the biggest complaints, why they're sometimes actually valid, and why at the end of the day, we're all still building WordPress sites. So let's start with the obvious. WordPress is a dinosaur in internet years. It's been around for multiple decades, and parts of it still feel like the early 2000s PHP type stuff. The code base is messy, full of legacy decisions and backwards compatibility issues. And as a developer, we want to work in modern solutions. WordPress, a lot of the time, definitely feels like it's stuck in the past. But with all that said, I think you could turn all those things that I just said into reasons why it's still alive and still very much a popular and valid platform on the internet. Businesses love it. Backwards compatibility keeps it from breaking and increases the investment time for anyone who's buying a website. So if we look at it through the consumer's eyes, the client's eyes, people who we build websites for, it just makes sense. That kind of longevity, though negative for us, is a positive for them. And talking about web developers, we are a very opinionated bunch. I need to do a video about developer relationships and basically why we're like cats and why we don't like each other. At least we don't like how the last guy built the program I'm currently working on, and so on. But some devs think WordPress equals PHP and PHP is bad. But why is it bad? Well, there's the age issue. And there's this idea that it's insecure and so on. And you know what? I could argue that, but let's stay focused here. WordPress's low barrier of entry means anyone can call themselves a developer. And I too find this very frustrating to see people call themselves developers when they don't know how to actually code. What they know how to do is install themes and plugins. Experienced developers hate dealing with amateur-built WordPress websites, and there are just so many of them out there. They're full of hacky code and bloated plugins, and you just take a look at it, and you're not wrong to say, this is not how this should have been done. But still, PHP is still everywhere. If you work in web development, you're gonna deal with PHP at some point. So you don't have to love PHP, but if you refuse to work in it, you're cutting yourself off from a huge portion of the web. And don't get me wrong, there are certainly careers to be made not doing PHP. But talking generally to people who are considering becoming web developers, PHP is a great skill to have. Now let's talk about the plugin hell. And that's where the real problems begin. WordPress being built on plugins is kind of cool because it means there's a whole bunch of open source stuff you can go out there and get. Do you need something to run a slider without having to write that from scratch? Get a plugin. You want something to display in a nice table? Get a plugin. You want to build a form? Well, you don't have to write code for that. There's a bunch of plugins for that. The problem is that these plugins, though an incredible strength for the ecosystem, also become its biggest weakness because, first of all, anyone can write a plugin, so There's no guarantee of quality within the actual plugin software. And a lot of them are just pure garbage. And then there's the bloat that they cause because people put up a site and now they need a form that, they want a form. So they put in a form plugin. Well, now they want to make sure that those entries are saved in a database. So they put a plugin in. Now they want that to send an email to different people and so on. Put a plugin. Now they got spam. So they want to use reCAPTCHA. Put a plugin. It builds up and up and up and creates this nasty mess of plugin hell. And plugins, too many of them, basically create performance issues, security risks, and is a maintenance nightmare. So that's why, as developers, sometimes we look at a WordPress site and think to ourselves, God, I hate this. But let's be honest, plugins have also made WordPress extremely flexible. A well-built WordPress site with a few key powerful plugins is amazing. But a WordPress site with 50 random plugins is a disaster waiting to happen. Now, we talked about how it's just old. I mean, it's a dinosaur. So it's not a modern CMS. Developers love shiny new tech, headless CMS, Jamstack, Laravel, whatever's next. There's a lot of reasons to check out these more modern platforms for sure. WordPress, meanwhile, still feels like WordPress, like it did 5, 10, 15 years ago. Sure, they've introduced things like Gutenberg and full site editing tools and stuff like that. But all that did really was divide the community. I mean, I still don't use those things. I think that they're absolutely horrible. So there I am hating on the platform. And one thing I'll say for sure that I hate about the platform is I feel like as an organization, it is definitely chasing the no-code page builders instead of making developers' lives easier. It's never going to compete with a Squarespace, Wix, or any of those, or even a Shopify. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have a place in the world. But this is why developers hate it, because it's trying to be something that it's never going to be. Developers hating on WordPress will also often talk about security and what a nightmare it is from a security standpoint. And it's kind of always been my opinion that it is what you make of it. Sure, if you load it up with 100 different plugins and cheap themes, yeah, your site probably has some security holes in it. If you fail to host it without a firewall or at least some kind of security plugin, then the site is at risk. And because it runs such a huge percentage of the internet, it's a big freaking target, right? So yeah, it is a security risk. It is an inherent security risk to use a popular platform where anyone can write any code for and in turn leave open any number of vulnerabilities. So it can be insecure, but it doesn't have to be insecure. A well-built WordPress website using best-in-class plugins and a limited number, either a well-built commercial theme or a custom theme by a developer who knows what they're doing, is not a high security risk. They become security risks if you never update the software. You install shady plugins. You don't secure the admin accounts and use really bad passwords. Bad WordPress sites get hacked all the time, and devs have to clean up this mess. We're not leaving it wide open on purpose, but it can happen. So WordPress is not inherently insecure, but it is a magnet for security disasters when used carelessly. So why do developers still use WordPress? After all that complaining, why is WordPress still dominant? It's because it's insanely flexible. WordPress can be anything you want it to be. Blogs, e-commerce, membership sites, complex applications, it's all possible. If you know how to build custom themes, use tools like ACF, build custom post types, WordPress is a powerful platform, and it's as powerful as you want to make it. Another reason is that the ecosystem is huge, and I touched on this before. This can be both an advantage and disadvantage, and that is the sheer number of plugins and resources that are out there. The community is massive, and clients already know this. So there's no need to convince them from a business standpoint that WordPress is probably the right choice for them. Also, clients ask for it. It's something they know. Again, that speaks to the longevity and the popularity of the platform. A lot of my clients simply don't consider any other platform. They use WordPress, they know WordPress, and if they're going to have a new website built, they ask for WordPress. It's the default go-to for many businesses out there, and for good reasons. So for a lot of developers and people who are trying to make a living in this space, fighting against WordPress just isn't worth it when there's money to be made building in WordPress. So with that said, it can be an easy moneymaker. Developers complain about WordPress, but they're also making bank maintaining, fixing, and optimizing it. From a selfish and developer's perspective, WordPress is great because it needs constant care, which equals reoccurring revenue. So do developers hate WordPress? Absolutely they do. A lot of them do. But do they still use it? Yes, many of us still do. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what we think, and as long as businesses need it, developers will keep working in it. So to the haters out there, WordPress is alive and well. I get it. I get why you might argue against it. But I tell you what, it's paying my bills and it's paying developer bills all over the world. The bad news for the haters is that WordPress is not going anywhere anytime soon. I would be very excited to see an alternative to WordPress, but I don't think it's on the horizon, or at least the immediate horizon.